People claim a knife in the back hurts most. They are wrong. Try dropping $80,000 on a rehearsal dinner, only to overhear your fiancé swearing love to your sister. I did not cry. I simply took my black card from his coat, walked into the Chicago rain, and stumbled into a laundromat where a bullet-riddled man pointed a gun at my head. That began a blood-soaked marriage and the city's darkest financial audit. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us now. Let's begin the story. I am Amelia Porter. As a senior auditor at Vanguard Freight Solutions, my entire life revolves around risk assessment, identifying fraudulent behavior, and maintaining a perfectly balanced ledger. My personal life was supposed to be exactly the same. I had spent 4 years building a flawless portfolio of a relationship with Julian. The rehearsal dinner was held at L'Etoile, a Michelin-starred trap, where the tasting menu cost $450 per head. We had invited 90 guests. You can easily do the math on the sheer financial waste of the evening. The air was thick with the scent of expensive truffles and the suffocating, heavy perfume of Julian's mother. A sharp migraine began pounding behind my temples, a steady throb warning me of an impending system failure. I slipped away from the main dining hall, navigating the dim, velvet-lined hallway toward the private coat room to find the bottle of ibuprofen I had stashed in my designer clutch. I reached for the brass handle of the heavy oak door, but paused. A muffled sound drifted through the narrow crack, a soft gasp, a familiar, sickeningly sweet giggle. I pushed the door open just a fraction of an inch. There, bathed in the amber light of the coat room, was Julian, my fiancé, the man who, not 20 minutes ago, had given a tearful toast about my unwavering loyalty and our bright future. His hands were currently buried in the blonde hair of my biological sister, Chloe. They were pressed against the rack of coats, intimately tangled right on top of the custom-tailored cashmere overcoat I had bought him for his birthday for $2,500. "Julian, stop. Someone might come in," Chloe whispered, though she made zero effort to push him away. "I do not care," Julian murmured, kissing her neck with a desperate hunger. "I cannot do this. Chloe, I cannot marry her tomorrow. It is you. It has always been you." "You have to," Chloe whined, her manicured fingers tracing his jawline. "She is paying for everything. Besides, we need time to figure out what to do about the baby. I am 2 months pregnant. Julian." 2 months, 8 weeks, approximately 60 days of biological deception right under my nose. Most women in this scenario would burst through the door, screaming, throwing punches, or collapsing into a puddle of devastated tears. But I am an auditor. When faced with a catastrophic loss, my brain bypasses emotion entirely and goes straight into damage control. I stood perfectly still in the shadows, letting my mind run a rapid, ice-cold calculation of my current assets and liabilities. Liability. Julian. Asset recovery. The downtown penthouse was solely in my name, purchased 2 years before we even met. The joint checking account I contributed exactly 80% of the funds. The wedding expenses were a sunk cost, highly irritating but ultimately deductible from my future emotional tax. And Chloe's pregnancy. That was the ultimate toxic asset, a permanent, irreversible liability that I wanted absolutely zero part of. The ledger was clear. It was time to liquidate. I pushed the door open completely. It hit the wall with a dull thud. Julian and Chloe sprang apart like cockroaches exposed to a sudden, blinding light. Julian's face drained of color, turning a pasty, pathetic shade of white. Chloe let out a high-pitched squeal, instinctively covering her flat stomach with both hands. "Amelia," Julian stammered, his voice trembling as he hastily adjusted his silk tie. "Amelia, please, let me explain. It is not what it looks like." "You are right," I said, my voice as flat and unreadable as a quarterly earnings report. "It looks like a tragic romance. The The reality is just incredibly bad financial management. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice or throw a tantrum. I simply walked over to him, reached into the inner breast pocket of his blazer, and smoothly extracted my black American Express card. He stood frozen, too terrified to move a muscle as I slid the heavy metal card into my own pocket. "You will need to find another way to fund your secret life," I told him calmly. I did not even look at my sister. She ceased to exist in my reality the exact second she mentioned the pregnancy. I turned on my heel and walked out of the coat room, leaving them suffocating in their own panicked silence. I marched straight back into the main dining room. 90 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expecting a heartfelt bride-to-be speech. The clinking of heavy silver on fine china stopped instantly. I walked directly to the head table, where Chloe's half-empty glass of vintage champagne sat. I twisted the 3-carat diamond ring off my left hand. It caught the crystal chandelier light one last time before I dropped it straight into her glass. The heavy stone hit the bottom with a sharp clink, sending expensive bubbles spilling over the rim onto the white linen tablecloth. "Attention, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the dead silent room. "The wedding is officially canceled. Please enjoy the $450 dinner. It is already paid for. Good night." I did not wait for the gasps, the frantic questions, or the inevitable chaos. I grabbed my trench coat and walked out the front doors of L'Etoile. The Chicago rain was coming down in sheets, heavy and freezing, washing away the suffocating heat of the restaurant. As the valet scrambled to ask if I needed my car, I shook my head and just started walking. For 4 long years, I had painstakingly constructed a life of pristine, unbearable perfection, a lucrative career, a handsome fiancé, a picturesque family dynamic. It was all a meticulously audited lie. The icy rain soaked through my silk dress, but I welcomed the brutal chill. The glittering skyline of the city felt nauseatingly bright and aggressively fake. I did not want the polished marble and crystal chandeliers anymore. I wanted the opposite. I craved the darkest, filthiest, most wretched corner of this entire city to hide from the blinding lights of my own ruined perfection. I kept walking into the dark, letting the storm swallow me whole. The neon sign above the door buzzed like a dying insect, spitting out a flickering, sickly pink light that barely illuminated the cracked pavement. It read, "Open 24 hours." I pushed open the glass door of the laundromat, the bell above chiming weakly. The air inside was thick with the scent of cheap detergent and wet lint. My silk dress, completely soaked from the Chicago storm, clung to my skin like a freezing second layer. I was a walking juxtaposition, dripping rain and ruined elegance onto a floor stained with decades of neglect. An old attendant snored behind bulletproof glass. The rhythmic thumping of the washing machines masked the sound of my ruined designer heels. Toward the back, past the rows of rusty dryers, I noticed an anomaly, a heavy steel door, painted to blend into the peeling wallpaper, stood slightly ajar. My auditor instincts flared. Spaces that do not logically fit the floor plan always hide something. I slipped through the gap. The air shifted instantly. The smell of bleach was replaced by the suffocating stench of stale cigar smoke, spilled liquor, and unwashed bodies. A narrow concrete staircase led me down into an underground cavern. It was a clandestine casino and dive bar. Men with hard eyes and scarred knuckles huddled over illegal poker tables. I walked straight to the sticky, scarred wooden bar, pulling myself onto a cracked leather stool. "Vodka," I told the bartender, a mountain of a man with a broken nose. "The absolute strongest you have. Neat." Before the shot glass even touched the wood, a heavy mass collided with the stool next to mine. A man slumped forward, his elbows hitting the bar with a dull thud. My nose twitched. Beneath the sharp scent of expensive vetiver cologne, there was the unmistakable, metallic tang of fresh blood. I glanced sideways. He was tall, impossibly broad-shouldered, wearing a custom Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most cars in this neighborhood, but the left side of his jacket was saturated, the dark fabric turning an ominous, glossy black. This was Roman Vance. Even a corporate auditor knew the rumors about the ruthless phantom who controlled the underground casinos and the dirtiest real estate laundering operations on the East Coast. Clearly, a violent internal purge had just spilled out onto the streets. His chest heaved. Then, the shrill wail of police sirens pierced the muffled atmosphere of the basement. Red and blue lights began flashing frantically through the grated sidewalk windows above us. The heavy boots of Chicago police officers slammed against the pavement outside. Roman stiffened. Before I could even blink, his right hand shot out. The freezing, unforgiving steel of a gun barrel pressed directly into my ribcage, hidden from the room by the drape of my ruined trench coat. "Do not make a single sound," he rasped, his voice a low, gravelly threat that vibrated with pain. The heavy steel door at the top of the stairs banged open. Flashlights swept down into the smoke-filled room. "Chicago police. Nobody move. We are looking for a bleeding suspect in a dark suit." The bartender froze. The poker players raised their hands. 2 officers began descending the stairs, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. One officer marched directly toward the bar. Roman was trapped. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, a fresh smear of blood stark across his cheekbone. In exactly 10 seconds, the officer would see the blood, draw his weapon, and a shootout would erupt. A shootout where a loaded gun was currently jammed into my ribs. My brain did not panic. It calculated. The risk of death by crossfire was currently 99%. I needed to lower those odds immediately. The officer was 5 steps away. I pivoted on my stool, grabbed the lapels of Roman's blood-soaked jacket, and hauled him violently toward me. I crashed my lips against his, tilting his head sharply to the right, burying his bloody cheek into the shadow of my neck. I leaned my body entirely over his, effectively shielding the bullet wound and the gun pressed against my side. Roman went entirely rigid beneath me. He tasted like copper, rain, and absolute danger. I deepened the kiss, burying one hand in his hair to keep his face completely hidden from the approaching flashlight. The beam of light hit us. It swept over my exposed back and my expensive, soaking wet evening gown. "Hey, break it up," the officer barked, shining the light directly onto my shoulder. I pulled back just a fraction of an inch, keeping my face practically pressed against Roman's, and let out an annoyed, breathless sigh, playing the part of an intoxicated, interrupted lover. The officer sneered in disgust at the sight of 2 rich drunks making out in a grimy basement. "Nothing here, just a couple of drunks," the officer called out to his partner over his shoulder. The heavy footsteps retreated. The steel door slammed shut. The sirens began to fade down the block. I immediately detached myself from Roman. I was breathing heavily, but my hands were completely steady. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a pristine silk handkerchief, and calmly wiped a smear of his blood off my bottom lip. Roman stared at me, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of shock and lethal suspicion. He slowly lowered the gun under the table. "Hold this," I commanded, pressing the folded silk handkerchief firmly against his bleeding side. "Apply direct pressure, or you will bleed out in 3 minutes." He winced, pressing his hand over the silk, but his eyes never left my face. "Who the hell are you?" he breathed, coughing weakly. Most women would have screamed and gotten us both killed. "I am an auditor," I replied smoothly, picking up my untouched shot of vodka and downing it in one swift motion. I just assessed that getting shot in a police raid was a far greater liability than kissing a fugitive. A dark, amused chuckle rumbled in his chest, turning into a groan of pain. He leaned closer, studying my ruined, expensive clothes and the absolute deadness in my eyes. He recognized the look of someone who had just watched their entire world burn and simply did not care anymore. "You have nerves of absolute steel," Roman whispered, his voice deadly serious now. "And I have a massive problem. I need a legal wife before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. It is a mandatory inheritance clause in a will to take absolute control of the syndicate council. I need someone who does not flinch at the sight of blood or a loaded gun." I looked at the notorious Mafia boss bleeding out on a sticky bar counter. I needed a reason to make my old life vanish completely. I needed a fortress. He was offering me a kingdom of shadows. "What are the terms?" I asked. The transition from a dingy basement to a freezing harbor warehouse took exactly 22 minutes in the back of a blacked-out SUV. The air inside the cavernous steel structure tasted of rust, motor oil, and salt. A dozen men holding automatic rifles stood in the shadows, forming a silent, lethal perimeter. In the center of the concrete floor sat a makeshift desk fashioned from two wooden shipping crates. Behind the crate stood a balding, terrified man shivering in a pair of plaid flannel pajamas and a hastily thrown-on raincoat. He was a mob lawyer, dragged directly from his warm bed to process a legally binding emergency marriage. Roman sat across from me on a metal folding chair. An underground surgeon had just finished stitching his gunshot wound and wrapping his torso in tight white gauze. He buttoned a fresh black shirt, wincing slightly, before sliding a thick legal document across the rough wood of the crate. "Here is the proposition," Roman said, his voice stripped of any romantic pretense. "I need this marriage registered and filed before 8 o'clock in the morning. If I am a married man by sunrise, the Syndicate Council must legally transfer absolute operational control of the East Coast territories to me. If I am single, the territory goes to a vote, and a civil war burns the city down." I picked up the document, and my compensation for becoming a human shield in a Mafia turf war. $10 million. Roman answered without blinking. "Wired directly into an untraceable offshore account the moment the ink dries. You receive absolute physical protection by my security detail. Furthermore, I will grant you the necessary leverage to completely ruin the man who betrayed you tonight. I get my empire. You get an ironclad fortress and a very lucrative vengeance." I scanned the clauses. It was a brilliant, ruthless piece of transactional art. There was no prenuptial affection, only cold, hard indemnity. The lawyer shifted nervously from foot to foot, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the freezing draft. "Do you have a pen?" I asked the terrified man. He fumbled in his raincoat and handed me a heavy gold fountain pen. My hand did not shake. I did not pause to mourn the ruined fantasy of the white dress or the $450 tasting menu I had abandoned hours ago. I simply pressed the gold nib to the paper and signed the name Amelia Vance. "Congratulations, boss," the lawyer squeaked, snatching the papers back as if they were on fire. "I will file this with the county clerk immediately." Roman looked at me, a flicker of genuine respect crossing his dark eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words faded into a muted hum. The sheer velocity of the night finally caught up with my biology. The shock of the betrayal, the freezing rain, the adrenaline of a police raid, and the signing away of my entire identity collided all at once. My vision narrowed into a dark tunnel. The concrete floor rushed up to meet me, and I plunged into absolute blackness. I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed espresso and the blinding glare of morning sunlight. I was lying in the center of a colossal, circular bed, draped in Egyptian cotton. The room was a masterpiece of modern architecture, featuring floor-to-ceiling glass windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. This was not a harbor warehouse. This was a billionaire's fortress in the sky. The heavy mahogany doors swung open. Roman walked in, wearing a sharp charcoal suit, looking completely unfazed by the bullet hole currently healing in his side. He tossed a thick manila folder directly onto my lap. "Good morning, wife," he said smoothly. "Our midnight transaction was a complete success. The council transferred power at exactly 7 o'clock this morning. I now hold the keys to the entire operation. Consequently, I have completely severed the supply lines and frozen the primary assets of the O'Connor family, the rival syndicate that ordered the hit on me yesterday." I sat up, ignoring the dull ache in my temples. "I assume there is a catch." "A rather large one," Roman smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "The O'Connors are furious and desperate. They figured out who you are. They have officially put a kill order on your head." I stared at him. "A kill order on my first day of marriage. Your romantic gestures leave a lot to be desired." "It gets better," Roman said, nodding at the folder on my lap. Open it. I flipped open the heavy manila cover. The first page bore a corporate logo I saw every single day of my life. Vanguard Freight Solutions, my employer. The O'Connors have been surviving by washing their illegal drug revenues through bloated overseas shipping invoices, Roman explained, his eyes turning cold and predatory. They are using your firm. Your company is the washing machine keeping my enemies alive. Bullets will not stop them right now. Math will. I need their accounts frozen, their ledgers exposed, and their dirty money completely drained. He walked to the edge of the bed and leaned in close. I need a ghost in the machine. I need my brilliant, cold-blooded auditor to go to work tomorrow and slaughter them from the inside. The concrete pillars of the underground parking garage at Vanguard Freight Solutions were bathed in a sickly fluorescent glow. It was exactly 7:45 in the morning. I stepped out of the black armored town car Roman had provided, my tailored charcoal skirt suit acting as my armor. I carried a calfskin briefcase and a meticulously crafted illusion of normalcy. Before I could even reach the elevator banks, a desperate, pathetic figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Julian. His designer suit, the exact one I had paid for last month, was deeply wrinkled. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes were wild with a frantic, manic energy. He looked like a man who had not slept in 48 hours. "Amelia," he gasped, lunging forward to block my path. "Amelia, please, you have to listen to me. You are making a massive mistake." I stopped, my expression perfectly blank. "Julian, you are trespassing on corporate property, and you are blocking my path to the elevator." "You are overreacting," he shouted, his voice echoing off the damp concrete walls. "You canceled our entire wedding over a stupid, drunken mistake. I love you. Amelia. Chloe means absolutely nothing to me. You are acting completely irrational right now. You need to call the vendors, uncancel everything, and let me come home. You are destroying our lives because you are too rigid to forgive." The sheer audacity of his psychological manipulation was almost clinically fascinating. He was attempting to distort my perception of reality, painting me as the vindictive villain for refusing to legally bind myself to the man who impregnated my own sister. "My apartment locks have been changed," I stated simply. "Your access to our joint checking account was revoked at exactly 6 o'clock yesterday evening. You have zero financial leverage. Julian, step aside." His face contorted from fake desperation to sheer, ugly rage. The facade of the charming fiancé shattered completely into pieces. "You vindictive bitch," he snarled. "You cannot just cut me off. I need that money you owe me." He lunged at me, his hand shooting out to grab my throat, intending to shove me violently against the cold concrete pillar to force me into his car.
He never made contact.
A shadow detached itself from the gloom behind my town car. The man was built like a cinder block, moving with terrifying silent speed. It was Silas, the lead security detail Roman had assigned to me, before Julian's fingers could even brush my silk collar. The bodyguard intercepted the movement. He grabbed Julian's wrist, twisted it sharply outward, and applied a brutal, upward snap. The sound of the bone breaking echoed like a dry branch snapping in the quiet garage. Julian let out a high-pitched, agonizing scream, dropping instantly to his knees. Silas did not utter a single syllable. He simply grabbed Julian by the collar of his expensive jacket, dragged his whimpering, flailing body 10 feet across the pavement, and tossed him headfirst into an open, putrid industrial dumpster. I did not even break my stride. I stepped onto the elevator, pressed the button for the 42nd floor, and checked my reflection in the polished steel doors. Not a single hair was out of place. By 9 o'clock in the morning, I was sitting behind the massive mahogany desk in my corner office. The quiet hum of the central air conditioning was a familiar, comforting white noise. The corporate world is built entirely on a foundation of polite deception, making it the perfect hunting ground. I locked my office door, drew the smart blinds shut, and logged into the Vanguard secure mainframe. As a senior auditor, my security clearance was absolute. I had the digital keys to every financial vault in the building. I began running a deep diagnostic on the offshore shipping manifests from the past 36 months. I bypassed the standard firewalls, hunting for the structural anomalies Roman had warned me about. It took me exactly 2 hours to find the rot. The O'Connor family was not even trying to be clever. They were using a series of shell companies based in the Cayman Islands to over-invoice shipments of low-grade agricultural supplies. Vanguard was processing millions of dollars a week in phantom freight, effectively scrubbing the blood off the cartel's drug money and turning it into legitimate, taxable corporate revenue. I opened a secure, encrypted terminal and began mirroring the hard drives, siphoning gigabytes of highly classified black market transaction records. But as my eyes scanned the endless columns of data, a specific string of numbers caught my attention. It was a secondary, hidden ledger, nested deep within a dummy corporate account, an accounts receivable file tracking outstanding debts owed directly to the O'Connors. I decrypted the file and froze. There, listed next to a catastrophic debt of $2.5 million, was a name I knew intimately: Julian. The columns detailed years of massive sports betting losses. The dates aligned perfectly with the timeline of our relationship. The puzzle pieces violently slammed together in my mind. Julian had not proposed to me because he loved me. He had targeted me because I was a highly paid executive with a pristine credit score and massive savings. He was planning to drain my accounts the absolute second we were legally bound, using my life's work to pay off the mob before they broke his legs. His entire existence in my life, the romance, the ring, the gaslighting in the parking lot, was nothing but a desperate, calculated financial bailout strategy. A cold, absolute fury settled into my bones. It was not the heat of heartbreak. It was the icy precision of a corporate executioner. "You found the bottom of the rabbit hole." A low voice resonated from the dark corner of my office. I did not flinch. I knew Roman had bypassed the building's security to observe me. He stepped out of the shadows, looking immaculate and extremely dangerous. He walked up behind my leather chair, leaning over my shoulder to stare at the glowing monitors. "I found everything," I replied, my voice frighteningly steady. "And I am not just going to copy these files. Roman, I am going to detonate them." My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I did not just expose the O'Connor accounts, I weaponized the corporate bureaucracy against them. Using my executive override, I triggered an automated, irreversible anti-money laundering protocol across the entire global network. I flagged their 20 largest shell companies for international fraud. Locking the funds in administrative purgatory, I initiated an immediate, catastrophic freeze on over $40 million of their liquid assets under the guise of an internal compliance audit. "By the time their bankers wake up tomorrow," I narrated calmly, hitting the final execution command, "their money will be trapped in federal escrow for a minimum of 6 months. They will not be able to buy a cup of coffee, let alone fund a syndicate war against you." Roman stared at the cascading lines of red code confirming the massive financial freeze. He looked down at me, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of absolute awe and a terrifying realization. He had married a woman strictly to secure his inheritance, but watching me dismantle a criminal empire with a few keystrokes and a heart completely devoid of mercy, he realized the truth. He had not married a corporate pawn. He had invited a true, ruthless monster into his house, hiding perfectly under the flawless silk blouse of an office worker. The burner phone on my massive mahogany desk vibrated violently at exactly 11 o'clock that night. The caller ID was entirely blocked, showing nothing but a string of dark pixels. When I answered, the voice on the other end was rough, vibrating with the desperate, jagged energy of a cornered animal. It was Liam O'Connor, the current head of the crumbling syndicate I had financially decapitated just 12 hours prior. "We have your pathetic excuse for an ex-fiancé, Mrs. Vance," Liam spat, the title a venomous insult meant to rattle my nerves. "And unless you want to receive pieces of his fingers in the mail for the next 6 months, you are going to undo the global asset freeze immediately. You will bring a physical drive containing the master decryption keys to Pier 42 at exactly 2 o'clock in the morning. Come alone. If you alert your new husband, or if my spotters see a single shadow that looks like a tactical squad, Julian gets a heavy bullet straight between the eyes. The line went dead with a sharp click. I stared at the phone. The O'Connors were drowning, gasping for air, and grasping at the absolute flimsiest piece of leverage they could possibly find. They actually believed I cared whether Julian lived or died. Roman stepped into the study, his eyes immediately locking onto the cold screen of the burner phone. I relayed the ransom demand to him with the clinical, emotionless detachment of an auditor reading a quarterly weather report. Roman's jaw tightened. He explicitly commanded me to stay inside the fortified walls of the penthouse. He ordered his elite tactical team to prepare an assault, instructing me to simply let the O'Connors execute Julian, as it would permanently solve a loose end without risking a single hair on my head. But Roman fundamentally misunderstood the core nature of an auditor. When an account is severely unbalanced, and the liabilities threaten to stain your pristine ledger, you do not let someone else close the books. You zero it out yourself. At 1 o'clock in the morning, while Roman was coordinating with his lieutenants in the underground war room, I bypassed the state-of-the-art penthouse security systems. I slipped out through the service elevator, wearing a heavy black trench coat and carrying a sleek silver briefcase. Inside the case was a laptop and a custom-built hard drive. It did not contain decryption keys. It contained a catastrophic, self-replicating malware payload designed by the dark web's finest architects to incinerate data servers on contact. I hotwired a stolen sedan from the lower garage and drove straight to the industrial waterfront. Pier 42 was a freezing graveyard of rusted shipping containers and rotting timber. The air was thick with a dense, freezing fog and the nauseating smell of dead fish and spilled diesel fuel. As I walked down the cracked concrete path, my leather boots echoing softly, the fog parted to reveal 5 heavily armed men. In the center, kneeling in a freezing puddle of dirty salt water, was Julian. His face was a horrific pulp of purple bruises, his expensive custom suit torn to shreds. "You actually came?" Liam O'Connor sneered, stepping out from behind a stacked metal crate. He pointed a heavy revolver directly at my chest. "I knew the icy corporate bitch routine was an act. Give me the drive, and maybe I will let your boy toy crawl back to whatever rock he came from." Before I could even speak a word in response, Julian raised his heavy head. His eyes, swollen entirely shut, darted blindly toward the sound of my voice with a mixture of terror and grotesque hatred. "It is her fault!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking hysterically into the freezing wind. "She ruined everything. She froze your money I was going to pay you back. Liam, I swear to God, she found out about the debt, and she did this just to punish me. Kill her. Just take the drive and shoot her right now. She is the one you want, not me." A heavy, stifling silence fell over the desolate pier. Even the hardened Mafia enforcers looked momentarily disgusted by the sheer magnitude of his betrayal. He was actively sacrificing me, the woman he had planned to marry 24 hours ago, just to buy himself a few more pathetic days of breathing. I looked down at Julian. I did not feel fear. I did not feel heartbreak, nor did I feel the sting of betrayal. I felt an overwhelming sense of profound validation. The trembling man on his knees was exactly the useless parasite I had calculated him to be. A short, bitter laugh escaped my lips. The sound echoed eerily against the rusted steel containers, cutting through the tension like a razor blade. "You really think I came out here in the freezing rain to save him?" I asked Liam, completely ignoring the revolver pointed at my heart. I placed the silver briefcase onto an oil-stained wooden crate and popped the heavy latches. The laptop glowed to life in the darkness, illuminating my face. "Julian is a liability. I am just here to finalize your bankruptcy." I connected the hard drive and calmly typed in a 12-character execution command. "What the hell are you doing?" Liam demanded, stepping forward abruptly, the hammer of his revolver clicking back with a metallic snap. "Stop typing right now." "You wanted your digital ledgers," I said calmly, my finger hovering over the heavy enter key. "I am sending them straight to hell." I struck the key. On the laptop screen, A crimson progress bar instantly flashed to 100%. The custom virus did not just target Vanguard's isolated servers. It violently backtracked through the secure connection Liam's men had established to verify the drive, infiltrating the O'Connor family's entirely separate, highly encrypted offshore cryptocurrency network. In exactly 4 seconds, over $80 million in untraceable digital currency was permanently wiped from existence. The digital wallets were completely scorched. The recovery phrases were permanently scrambled into meaningless code. Liam's burner phone began to vibrate violently. One of his hackers stationed in a surveillance van nearby started screaming frantically over the open radio channel. She burned it. She burned all of it. The money is gone. It is all gone. Liam's face twisted into a grotesque mask of pure homicidal rage. He raised his heavy gun, aiming directly at the center of my forehead. "You dead bitch!" He pulled the trigger. The deafening crack of a high-velocity sniper rifle split the night air a fraction of a second before Liam's gun could fire. Liam's chest exploded outward in a massive spray of dark crimson. He collapsed backward, dead before his lifeless body hit the rusted metal of the pier. Absolute chaos erupted. From the massive industrial cranes above, from the deep shadows of the shipping containers, Roman's elite tactical team materialized like ghosts of vengeance. Suppressed automatic gunfire rained down with terrifying surgical precision. The remaining O'Connor enforcers were cut down in mere seconds, their bodies dropping into the freezing water or slumping violently against the wooden crates. The violence was deafening, brutal, and entirely devoid of mercy. Through it all, I stood perfectly still, watching the blood pool around my expensive leather boots. Not a single bullet came within 5 feet of my body. The gunfire ceased as abruptly as it had begun. The heavy metallic scent of fresh blood entirely overpowered the smell of the ocean. Heavy footsteps echoed through the fog. Roman stepped out of the thick mist, an assault rifle resting casually against his dark tactical vest. His eyes burned with a terrifying, primal intensity as he surveyed the absolute carnage, then locked firmly onto me. He was clearly furious that I had disobeyed his direct orders, yet visibly captivated by the sheer destruction I had just caused with a single keystroke. "I explicitly told you to stay in the penthouse," Roman said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated in the damp air. "I had to close the account personally," I replied simply, snapping the laptop shut. A pathetic whimpering sound drew our attention downward. Julian was still kneeling in the thick mud, completely covered in the blood of the dead men surrounding him. He was violently shaking, sobbing uncontrollably, his bloody hands clasped together in a desperate, pathetic prayer. "Emilia," Julian choked out, crawling blindly toward my boots. "Emilia, please, you saved me. Thank you. Oh God, thank you so much. I am so sorry. Please, just take me with you." I looked down at the man who had stolen 4 years of my life, the man who had gleefully slept with my sister, the man who had just begged a syndicate boss to put a bullet in my brain. "I did not save you, Julian," I said, my voice completely devoid of any human warmth or sympathy. "I just wiped out the O'Connors, but those vicious Vegas bookies you owe your other gambling debts to, they are still very much alive, and now you have absolutely zero protection." I did not shoot him. Shooting him would have been a quick, painless mercy. I let him live with the absolute, terrifying certainty that his days were numbered, and every single shadow in the city would become his executioner. I stepped cleanly over his trembling body and walked toward the idling armored SUV. Roman watched me for a long moment, a slow, dark smile spreading across his sharp face, before turning his back on Julian's agonizing screams and following his wife into the black night. 3 months later, the dust had completely settled over the Chicago underworld. With the rival syndicate permanently erased from the map, Roman held absolute, undisputed control to publicly cement his new reign under the guise of legitimate high society. He hosted a massive charity gala at the Grand Heritage Hotel. The ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers, flowing silk, and predatory wealth. Politicians, judges, and corporate titans mingled freely with Roman's impeccably dressed enforcers. I stood at the top of the sweeping marble staircase, surveying the empire we had secured. I was no longer the exhausted corporate auditor hiding in a sensible gray skirt. I wore a custom floor-length gown of midnight blue silk, a heavy diamond collar resting against my collarbone. When I descended the steps, the room instinctively parted for me. I was not just a wife on paper anymore. I was the architect of their financial supremacy, the undisputed queen of a shadow kingdom. Halfway through the evening, as I stood near the balcony sipping a glass of vintage Bordeaux, a minor commotion broke out near the service entrance. Two of Silas's massive security guards were blocking a frail, shivering woman attempting to push her way inside. Her blonde hair was a matted mess, her clothes were stained, and her pregnant belly was clearly visible beneath a cheap, oversized coat. It was Chloe. I signaled Silas to let her through. She stumbled toward me, her eyes red and swollen from crying, looking entirely out of place amidst the billionaires and crime lords. "Amelia," Chloe gasped, her voice cracking as she collapsed to her knees on the polished marble floor. "Please, you have to help me. I have absolutely nowhere else to go." I did not offer her a hand. I simply took another slow sip of my wine. "You are trespassing at a private event. Chloe." "Julian is gone," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "The bookies came for him 2 weeks ago. He stole my car, emptied my meager savings, and completely vanished. He left me with all of his hidden debts. The bank foreclosed on the condo yesterday. I am sleeping in a homeless shelter. I am 5 months pregnant and I have absolutely nothing." I looked down at the pathetic creature weeping at my feet, the sister who had gleefully plotted to fund her secret romance with my life savings. There was no anger left in my chest. There was only a profound, freezing emptiness. I turned to a nearby silver tray, picked up a heavy fountain pen, and pulled a leather checkbook from my diamond clutch. I wrote out a sum that was more than enough to buy a modest house in a quiet suburban town and raise a child comfortably. I tore the slip of paper and let it flutter down, landing perfectly on her stained coat. Chloe looked at the number, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief. "Amelia, I am so sorry. Thank you." "Do not thank me," I cut her off, my voice sharp and devoid of any sisterly warmth. "That is not a gift. It is a severance package. You will take that money and you will board a train tomorrow morning. You will leave Chicago. You will never return to this city, and you will never, ever introduce yourself with the surname Porter again. If I ever see your face in my territory, I will let my husband's debt collectors handle you." Chloe swallowed hard, terrified by the absolute deadness in my eyes. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the check like a lifeline, and ran out into the cold night without looking back. I had finally liquidated my last remaining liability. By 2 o'clock in the morning, the ballroom was completely empty. The grand doors of the penthouse study clicked shut, leaving Roman and me alone in the dim light of a single desk lamp. The air was thick with the scent of aged whiskey and leather. Roman walked over to the massive oak desk. He did not pour a drink. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a crisp, white manila envelope. He placed it gently onto the center of the desk and slid it toward me. "The agreed 90 days have passed," Roman said, his voice unusually quiet, carrying a weight I had never heard before. "My position on the syndicate council is permanently secured. The territory is mine. You fulfilled your end of the contract with terrifying perfection." I looked at the envelope. I knew exactly what was inside. "Inside are the divorce papers, completely finalized and already signed by me," he continued, leaning against the edge of the desk. "Along with the routing numbers for an offshore account containing $10 million, you are free, Amelia. You can walk out of that door right now, return to the corporate world, and live the peaceful, normal life you had before you walked into that basement." I stared at the stark white paper sticking out of the envelope. I thought about the normal life he was offering me. I thought about the endless, suffocating board meetings, the fake smiles, the polite deceptions, and the agonizingly boring safety of a predictable ledger. Then, I thought about the sheer, intoxicating rush of power I felt when I erased a cartel with a single keystroke. I remembered the blazing freedom of standing on a blood-soaked pier, completely untouchable. I did not want to be a civilian ever again. The old Amelia Porter died in a Michelin-starred restaurant. The woman standing in this study was forged in fire and gunpowder. I picked up the divorce papers. I walked slowly toward Roman, my eyes locked dead onto his. I reached into the pocket of his tailored vest and pulled out his heavy silver Zippo lighter. I flipped the lid open with a sharp metallic clink and struck the flint. I held the flame to the corner of the legal document. We both watched in silence as the fire consumed the thick paper. Turning the escape clause into black ash, I dropped the burning remnants into a crystal ashtray on his desk. I closed the distance between us, stepping entirely into his personal space. I wrapped my arms around his neck, feeling the heavy, dangerous rhythm of his heartbeat against my chest. "I am not going anywhere," I whispered, a slow, razor-sharp smile spreading across my lips. "This city just got a new boss, and I am taking exactly half." Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Zoe Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.